Right now, thousands of drivers are paying $15 a plug for a premium brand name and getting a counterfeit fake shipped straight to their driveway instead. NGK has spent years fighting fake iridium plugs, flooding Amazon and eBay. Wrong resistance, wrong gap, barely a spark. Meanwhile, 7 of the cheapest genuine spark plug brands on the market are quietly matching, and in independent tests beating NGK and Denso, and almost nobody talks about it. Your dealer won't mention that Toyota built its own V6 with NGK on one bank and Denso on the other for years, because that proves the badge doesn't matter, the metal does. Today, the 7 budget brands that actually deliver, and the premium plug quietly scamming your wallet. How this list was built. Before you trust a single brand on this list, you need to know how it was tested, because this isn't a guess. It's built from 3 sources. First, the YouTube channel Project Farm, which has run repeated back-to-back spark plug comparisons, swapping brands including E3, Polestar, Autolite Racing, and NGK Iridium and COT and Copper on the same engine and measuring fuel efficiency and combustion behavior directly, rather than trusting a marketing sheet. Second, years of accumulated owner testimony from enthusiast communities like Bob is the Oil Guy, where mechanics and serious DIYers have compared brand-for-brand results across hundreds of real vehicles, not a single anecdote. Third, documented technical explanations from ASE certified master technicians who've spent decades diagnosing exactly what separates a good plug from a bad one at the metallurgical level. Here's what those 3 sources agree on almost universally. A spark plug's real job comes down to 3 things: conducting electrical current through a copper core with roughly 400 watts per meter Kelvin of thermal conductivity, surviving combustion chamber temperatures that regularly hit 4,500 to 6,500 degrees Fahrenheit, and holding a precise electrode gap under pressures exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch. None of that depends on the name printed on the ceramic insulator. It depends on the alloy, the weld, and the tolerance the factory held during manufacturing. There's history behind why this market even exists the way it does. Before the Clean Air Act of 1970 forced emission standards and catalytic converters into every American car by the mid-1970s, spark plugs were a high-maintenance item across every brand. Leaded gasoline fouled electrodes so badly that annual tune-ups were standard practice at around 12 to 15,000 miles. The shift to platinum and iridium electrodes wasn't a premium brand marketing invention. It was an industry-wide materials response to emissions regulation adopted by every serious manufacturer, not just the 2 names that eventually built the strongest advertising budgets. The global spark plug market itself is projected to keep growing toward nearly $6 billion by 2027, and that growth is coming from iridium and platinum designs across dozens of manufacturers, not 2. But here's what makes this suspicious. Forum consensus among experienced technicians consistently ranks Autolite, Bosch, Champion, and ACDelco right alongside NGK and Denso as legitimate, trustworthy plugs. Not knockoffs, not compromises, not good enough for now. If the budget brands were genuinely inferior, why would General Motors, Ford, and BMW build them directly into brand new vehicles as original factory equipment? You're about to find out that they already do and have for decades. Let's start at number 7, Champion Spark Plugs. Champion has been manufacturing ignition components for well over a century, which makes it one of the oldest spark plug brands still on the market today, older than the premium reputation people assume it can't compete with. Right now, Champion's iridium line typically prices a few dollars below Autolite's equivalent tier, while its copper and single platinum shells share manufacturing lineage with ACDelco's rapid fire line, a fact you can confirm yourself by matching the shell markings stamped directly onto both product lines. That means when you buy a budget Champion plug, in some product lines you may be buying the exact foundational component GM sells you under its own name for more money. A SE certified technician, Mia Bavacqua, who holds Master Automobile Technician certification, has pointed out that a plug's material tier, copper, platinum, or iridium, matters far more for total ownership cost than the brand stamped on the box, because the material determines wear resistance against spark erosion, not the logo. Copper wears fastest and needs replacement around 30,000 miles. Platinum and iridium resist that erosion and stretch service life towards 60 to 100,000 miles. Champion sells all 3 tiers, at a price point consistently below the equivalent NGK offering. But here's what makes this the smartest budget move on this entire list. A driver who replaces cheap Champion copper plugs every 30,000 miles for the life of a vehicle can spend less in total money across 200,000 miles of driving than a single set of NGK's top-tier ruthenium plugs, while getting fresh, unworn electrodes twice as often, which some high-compression engines actually prefer. Owners comparing Champion Iridium against name-brand alternatives on Ford and GM forums describe nearly identical cold start behavior and idle quality, with the only real trade-off being a shorter published service interval on some product lines, rather than any measurable performance gap. At a typical price under $8 a plug and a 60,000-mile rated life on the Iridium tier, Champion runs at roughly a tenth of 1 cent per mile. Proof that cheap and wrong have never meant the same thing. There's a reason precious metal plugs cost more in the first place, and it has nothing to do with brand prestige. Iridium is one of the rarest and hardest metals used in manufacturing, priced in the hundreds of dollars per gram on commodity market, and it takes roughly 9 to 10 spent spark plugs just to recover a single pound of usable material during recycling. Every brand on this list, Champion included, is paying that same raw material cost. The only variable a company actually controls is how much extra it charges on top of it for the name on the box. Number 6 gets stranger. E3 spark plug. E3 doesn't try to copy NGK or Denso's fine wire iridium design, it does something completely different. Its patented diamond fire electrode uses an angled, multi-surface ground electrode instead of a simple wire tip, engineered to expose more of the spark event directly to the air-fuel mixture rather than shielding part of it behind metal. When Project Farm ran E3 head-to-head against Polestar, Autolite Racing, and NGK's iridium and copper lines on identical engines, E3 measured a modest, repeatable improvement in fuel efficiency compared to the conventional design. Not a massive leap, but a real, measured one. Now, to be straight with you, this isn't a brand with unanimous praise. Some forum members who ran their own fuel economy tests report gains too close to call, and a few dismiss the effect as more placebo than provable given small sample sizes. But here's what makes this worth your attention anyway. Multiple independent testers using different engines and different fuel tracking methods keep measuring improvement in the same direction, even when they disagree on the exact size of the gain. That is a meaningfully different situation than a brand whose only supporting evidence is its own marketing copy. E3 plugs are priced competitively with mid-tier iridium options from the bigger brands, sitting well below NGK's flagship pricing, while offering a genuinely different electrode geometry instead of a cheaper imitation of someone else's patent. Because the plug's core selling point is efficiency rather than raw longevity, the real math here isn't just cost per mile, it's cost per mile after fuel savings. And if even a fraction of the measured gain holds up on your engine, the plug can functionally pay for its own price difference through what you save at the pump. This is also the entry that best proves the point of this entire video. E3 isn't hiding behind a legacy name or decades of advertising. It's a smaller manufacturer whose only path to credibility was surviving direct, repeatable, independently run testing against brands with far bigger marketing budgets, and it's still standing in that comparison. Compare that to buying a big name plug from a random online seller with zero way to verify what's actually inside the box until it's already failed in your engine. One of those is a calculated risk with public data behind it. The other is a guess. Number 5 is hiding in plain sight on some of the most expensive cars on the road. Delphi. Delphi doesn't get talked about on car forums nearly as much as the other 6 brands on this list, and that's exactly the problem, because Delphi is BMW's chosen ignition system supplier, selected specifically after the automaker worked to resolve misfire issues tied to a previous supplier on its engines. That is not a budget brand footnote. That is a European luxury manufacturer trusting Delphi's plugs and coils enough to install them at the factory in cars that start well north of $50,000. But here's what's suspicious about how invisible this brand stays to the average American buyer. Delphi maintains standardized manufacturing protocols and identical technical specifications across its global production facilities, and its plugs are engineered to the same heat range and electrode gap tolerances that automakers like BMW require for original equipment status, the exact category of precision that NGK and Denso advertise as their headline selling point when they charge a premium for it. Owners who source genuine Delphi plugs report the same reliable cold start and idle behavior you'd expect from any factory-grade European ignition component, without paying the boutique import parts markup that inflates prices on brands whose real manufacturing footprint is far smaller than their reputation suggests. At a typical 60,000-mile service interval and a price that competes directly with Bosch, Delphi lands in the same fraction of a cent per mile territory as everything else on this list. Genuine OE engineering with almost none of the brand recognition tax. Part of why Delphi stays invisible to American buyers comes down to distribution, not quality. It's stocked heavily through dealer-adjacent and specialty European parts channels, rather than the big box aisle most drivers walk through, so it never built the shelf space recognition that turns a brand into a household name. But a plug engineered to BMW's factory tolerance doesn't stop being BMW's factory tolerance just because you found it somewhere less familiar. Number 4 is the plug quietly installed at the factory on some of the best-selling vehicles in Europe. Bosch Double Iridium. Bosch's OE fine wire double iridium plug puts precious metal on both the center electrode and the ground electrode, a design normally reserved for the most expensive tiers on the market, and it remains one of the best-selling iridium plugs in the US aftermarket year after year. The double electrode design matters more than it sounds like it should. In a coil-on plug or waste spark ignition system, both electrodes take real wear over the plug's service life, protecting only the center electrode. The way many single iridium designs do leaves the ground electrode to erode faster, which quietly shortens the plug's real-world life even while the iridium label on the box stays technically accurate. Bosch is the OEM ignition supplier across a massive share of the European vehicle market, meaning the identical fine wire engineering shipping on a brand new BMW, Mercedes, or Volkswagen from the factory is sold to American DIY ERs in a plain box at the local parts store. But here's what makes this suspicious. If double electrode protection were just marketing fluff, it wouldn't be the exact configuration multiple automakers independently choose to bolt in before the car ever reaches a customer's driveway. Reviewers and forum members comparing Bosch double iridium directly against NGK's flagship ruthenium tier consistently report nearly indistinguishable idle smoothness and throttle response between the two, with Bosch priced meaningfully below NGK's top-shelf offering. Rated for roughly 60,000 miles at a typical street price under $10 a plug, Bosch double iridium lands close to 1/10 of a cent per mile, premium tier engineering at a mid-tier price tag. There's also a technical detail almost nobody outside a parts counter ever hears about. NGK's center electrode typically measures around 0.6 millimeters, while Denso's typically runs closer to 0.4 millimeters, meaning the actual iridium content between two equivalent premium plugs isn't even identical to begin with. If the two most expensive brand names on the market don't agree on how much precious metal a plug needs, that's your proof the specification itself has room for a well-engineered double iridium design from a third manufacturer to compete on merit, not just price. Before the top 3, there's something you need to hear. Hit subscribe right now, because what happens with the last 3 plugs on this list, including the real number 1, is going to change how you shop for parts for the rest of your life. But first, the systemic problem making this entire video necessary: the counterfeit plug. Crisis nobody talks about. Search counterfeit NGK spark plugs, and you'll find years of owner reports across VW Vortex, Honda Pilot forums, Toyota forums, and even boating communities, all describing the exact same pattern. Plugs bought online through third-party sellers, arriving in packaging that looks almost perfect, installed exactly to factory spec, and triggering a mystery misfire within weeks that no amount of diagnostics can explain, until someone finally checks the plugs themselves. One VW Vortex owner spent months chasing a random cylinder 2 misfire on a 3.6-liter VR6 before finally discovering the NGK plugs installed a year earlier had a gap wildly out of spec, a classic red flag for a counterfeit. A Honda Pilot forum thread describes a driver who called NGK directly and confirmed that all 6 plugs pulled from their engine were fake, after the vehicle had been misfiring since the day it was purchased. On eBay's own community forums, one buyer reported internal resistance readings on genuine plugs measuring well over 130,000 ohms, when NGK's actual published specification calls for roughly 5,000 ohms. That is not a quality variance. That is a completely different, uncertified part wearing someone else's name. But here's what makes this criminal. NGK's own customer service has confirmed on the record that there is no reliable way to visually guarantee authenticity without sending a plug-in for laboratory analysis, meaning even a careful buyer who follows every packaging tip they can find online still has no real certainty they're getting the genuine part from a random online marketplace seller. You are paying premium prices for a coin flip, and counterfeiters specifically target the brands with the biggest markup and the highest resale demand, not the plugs already selling at a fair, honest price. This is exactly why the 7 genuine budget brands on this list matter more than the safer badge people assume they're avoiding. A cheap misfire diagnosis alone can run $50 to $150 before a shop even identifies the root cause. Left unresolved, that misfire dumps unburned fuel into your exhaust system and can destroy your catalytic converter, a repair that averages between $900 and $2,500 nationally and can climb past $4,000 depending on your vehicle, according to multiple independent repair cost surveys published this year. A single counterfeit $9 NGK plug can trigger a bill 250 times its own price. That's the real cost per mile math nobody puts in a video title. And the catalytic converter isn't even the only casualty. A prolonged misfire also overworks the ignition coil feeding that cylinder, and coil replacement alone has averaged around $200 per repair in recent industry surveys, meaning a single counterfeit plug can realistically stack a coil replacement on top of a converter replacement on top of the diagnostic fee, all trace back to one fake part that never should have made it into your engine bay. As one forum member put it bluntly while discussing the counterfeit problem, Even parts bought through supposedly proper retail channels aren't automatically safe anymore. The badge stopped being a guarantee the moment counterfeiters figured out which badge sells the fastest. Now, the top 3. ACDelco. Here's the fact that should make you angry. ACDelco doesn't actually manufacture most of its own spark plug lineup. Their copper and single platinum rapid fire plugs are produced by Champion, again confirmable by matching the shell markings, while their double platinum and iridium lines are built by Denso, the exact same company whose plugs sell for roughly double the price under Denso's own name on the same store shelf. You are paying for GM's badge, not GM's manufacturing. But here's what makes this criminal. Denso built ACDelco iridium plugs use the identical laser-welded fine wire electrode construction found in genuine Denso branded parts, according to side-by-side technical breakdowns from technicians who physically compared the internal components. The difference sitting in the box is marketing, not metallurgy. ACDelco's iridium plugs typically run in the same general price range as Autolite's premium tier, often under $10 each, while carrying full Denso-grade internal engineering behind GM's own logo. The technical explanation matters here too. Iridium's core advantage is resistance to spark erosion, the microscopic pitting that gradually widens a plug's gap over tens of thousands of miles, which is what eventually causes a weak, inconsistent spark, a rough idle, and a check engine light. That erosion resistance is a property of the metal itself, not the brand printed above it, whether that iridium sits inside an ACDelco shell or an NGK one costing twice as much. At a rated 60,000-mile service life and a roughly $8 price point, ACDelco iridium runs about 1/10 of a cent per mile, with genuine Denso engineering underneath. This is also the clearest proof on the entire list that brand loyalty and manufacturing quality are two completely separate decisions. A GM owner who insists on ACDelco out of brand loyalty and a Toyota owner who insists on genuine Denso out of brand loyalty can, in the iridium tier, be buying components from the exact same production line. The badge tells you who marketed the part. It has never reliably told you who built it. Number 2 hides behind the exact car you might already be driving. Motorcraft. Motorcraft is Ford's own factory parts division, and it shares deep engineering lineage with Autolite. Several Motorcraft plug lines are effectively built to the same core specification used across Ford's engine lineup. A double platinum Motorcraft plug typically runs around $12, more than Autolite, but still a fraction of NGK's premium tiers, and it comes with something money doesn't easily buy elsewhere. Guaranteed factory spec heat range, an electrode gap engineered for your exact engine, not a universal fit approximation. Richard McQuistion, an ASE certified master automobile technician with nearly 50 years in the field and certifications across 10 separate specialty categories, has explained that a plug mismatched to the wrong heat range for an engine is frequently the real cause behind complaints. People mistakenly blame on the brand itself, not the metal, but a mismatch between the plug's design and the engine's actual thermal needs. That single detail quietly eliminates most of the misfire complaints people pin on cheap plugs in online reviews because the plug was never wrong. The application was. But here's what dealers rarely advertise out loud. Because Motorcraft is the literal factory-installed plug, running anything else in a Ford engine, including NGK, technically makes you the one deviating from the engineer's original specification, not the other way around. Independent owner comparisons across Ford enthusiast forums consistently describe smooth idle recovery and clean fuel trim readings switching between Motorcraft and pricier iridium alternatives, with the main trade-off being a few dollars saved rather than any performance sacrificed. Towing and heavy load performance is where this distinction matters most, and it's the one scenario owners bring up again and again. Drivers who tow trailers or haul heavy loads consistently report that factory-spec Motorcraft plugs feel punchier under sustained load than aftermarket upgrades that weren't engineered around that specific engine's thermal profile in the first place. A reminder that the correct heat range for your exact application beats a bigger price tag every time. At $12 for a plug commonly rated past 60,000 miles, you're looking at roughly 0.2 of a cent per mile, still dramatically cheaper than chasing a misfire caused by a mismatched or counterfeit upgrade. And now, the plug actually sitting at number 1. Autolite Iridium XP. Autolite has been building spark plugs since 1936, and right now, its Iridium XP series sells for roughly $5 to $9 a plug, less than half of what a comparable NGK Iridium plug runs at most parts stores, for a design targeting the exact same fine wire performance category. Larry Carley, an ASE certified technician who has covered ignition systems in the automotive trade press for more than 30 years and authored 12 books on Automotive repair, has explained that once a plug moves to a fine wire iridium or platinum center electrode, wear rate drops dramatically, and the plug can realistically run 60,000 to 100,000 miles with minimal degradation, physics that doesn't care what logo is stamped on the shell. But here's what makes this the most personal entry on the entire list. Autolite is also the OE, original equipment, supplier for the majority of Ford's engine lineup, which means the exact same engineering that leaves the factory on a brand new F-15, O or Explorer is sold to you in a box for a fraction of dealer replacement price. Owners swapping between Autolite XP and pricier double platinum alternatives on forums like Bob is the Oil Guy routinely report identical idle quality, identical throttle response, and no measurable difference in stored misfire codes across tens of thousands of miles. Here's the number that ties this entire video together. At roughly $7 a plug rated for 60,000 miles, Autolite XP runs about 1/10 of 1 cent per mile. Genuine OE-grade fine wire iridium engineering, at a price most people spend on a large coffee. Compare that to what happens when a driver gets scammed on a counterfeit premium plug from a random third-party online seller. A single bad batch with an out-of-spec gap can trigger a rolling misfire that cooks a catalytic converter, and that repair now averages between $900 and $4,500 depending on the vehicle. That's not a repair bill, that's a financial disaster triggered by an $8 part that was never real in the first place. Run the comparison across a single vehicle's ownership. A driver who buys genuine Autolite XP for 2 full replacement cycles over 120,000 miles spends somewhere around $14 to $18 total per cylinder position, a number so small it barely shows up on a maintenance budget. A driver who instead gets unlucky once buying a single set of counterfeit NGK plugs from the wrong online seller can spend more on one catalytic converter repair than an Autolite owner will spend on ignition parts for the entire life of the vehicle. That is not a close comparison. That is not even the same category of financial risk. And this is the part that should really bother you. Autolite isn't some obscure startup trying to earn your trust for the first time. It has been supplying Ford's factory ignition systems for generations, which means the exact fine wire iridium metallurgy protecting a brand new engine on the assembly line is sitting on a parts store shelf, unglamorous and cheap, while a counterfeit sold under a prestige name sits one search result above it online for twice the price and none of the certainty. The badge was never the safe choice. The metal was. And the metal has been available this whole time for a fraction of what fear-based marketing has convinced people to pay for a name. Here's the bottom line. 7 genuine budget spark plug brands, Champion, E3, Delphi, Bosch, ACDelco, Motorcraft, and Autolite, are engineered by many of the exact same suppliers, to the exact same tolerances as the plugs installed at the factory on brand new Fords, GMs, and BMWs. The real danger was never the cheap brand sitting on the bottom shelf. It's the counterfeit premium plug sitting in a random online cart, waiting to turn a $9 purchase into a $2,000 catalytic converter bill. Has a genuine premium plug ever let you down? Or has a budget brand outlasted every expectation you had for it? Drop it in the comments. I read every one. Next, the oil filter sold at nearly every major parts store right now that's quietly contaminating your fresh oil change within the first 100 miles, and why almost nobody checks for it before it's too late.